What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Busters podcast. We are recording this in the morning on Thursday, January 19th. Thank you for joining us as always. We are recording an Evergreen Dynasty advice video today, but let's finish the intros here. My name is Eric. My wonderful co-host over there, his name is Will. How you doing this morning, man?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good. Ready to talk some Dynasty. A little bit of different stuff for you guys today. I'm actually really excited.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited to get into this part of the offseason. We're full force into Dynasty now. We'll start talking about all the prospect profiles and, draft preparation and stuff like that. It's going to be fun times, so stick with us for sure. But this opening video to kind of get everybody into the Dynasty mindset is something that I think that could apply for years down the road. It's not just, this season thing. And I think it could help people, whether they're seasoned veterans in Dynasty or whether they're just getting started with their very first league. So hopefully this helps out a lot of people. And yeah, let's get right into it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is advice for roster construction in dynasty leagues. Obviously, this is going to depend on format and scoring format and all that kind of stuff. But general advice. This first one is for superflex leagues specifically, and it's that quarterbacks will never be cheaper than during the startup draft. It becomes almost impossible to trade for quarterbacks once the league gets underway, and so it's really important to lock up your most important assets while you have the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you want to value the quarterback position because they are, like you said, extremely hard to get during their season, but also pretty hard to get, if someone is to let a quarterback go because they're highly valued. So people are going to be looking for quarterbacks, always scraping the wire, looking for stuff to pick up. So definitely lock them up while you have the opportunity to.
Yeah, 100%. And just to give like a little bit of an example, we started a dynasty league 2 years ago, and it was our first experience in a dynasty league together. There were a lot of people in the league who's it was their first time in a dynasty league, and so this is a good example of like if you're in a newish league, you could have this situation where a lot of quarterbacks got ripped off in the beginning. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. But then after that, it kind of cooled down, and there were a ton of discounts. And again, this is 2 years ago, so some of this is going to sound blasphemous, and it kind of is. But still, like Jalen Hurts went all the way in the seventh. Kirk Cousins went all the way in the seventh. Matthew Stafford, who had really productive seasons the past 2 seasons, went in the sixth round. So just stuff like that. Like those guys shouldn't be falling that low. And so we're telling you now, if you're new, don't let them fall that low. This is the startup is your time to get these guys at the best possible value.
Absolutely.
So the next one up here is about running backs, and I think having dominant running backs is just as important in dynasty as it is in redraft if you're trying to win championships. But that's the biggest point, because it's important to remember that a running back shelf life is really really short. So you don't want to waste a running back's best years and peak value on a team that's not competing, on a team that you don't think can win a championship. And so, if you're not a contender, I think it's important to sell your running backs while they are at their peak value and while they are producing their highest, so that you can turn your team around and then replenish your running backs in time for that championship run. And the last thing is just finding productive running backs in rookie drafts. I feel like isn't that hard. So if you are to sell your running backs, replenishing that position, isn't that difficult.
Yeah, because it's just like Eric said, the shelf life for running backs just isn't all that great, to be honest with you, in terms of value. And just for example, those 2 years ago, I drafted Alvin Kamara to my team. And right now, I've got him on my team. I don't even know if he's going to play next season or what his whole situation is going to be. He's getting older, obviously, as years go by. If he doesn't play next season, that's just another year that he's even older, and I don't know, and I'm just more uncertain. Whereas I could have maybe put that value somewhere else or traded him 2 years ago during that season, trying to get him off to a team who wanted to win when he was productive. Because now he's an aging running back on a team that I'm not too sure about, in a situation that I'm not sure about anymore.
Right, and I think that's a perfect example. And I'm going to talk about this not to throw you under the bus, but genuinely because I think it's going to be super helpful for people out there. When you in the startup draft, you drafted a pretty young team. You
Mm-hmm.
prioritized the Kyle Pittses, Trevor Lawrence, Jamar Chase, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So you got those high end talents, but then the rest of your team, it just wasn't ready to compete yet. And so Alvin Kamara didn't really fit your mold because
Yeah.
he was already getting a little bit older. And it's not that he still can't be good, but like you said, coming into this offseason now, you still have him on your team, and we don't know what a suspension situation is like. So his value has cratered when you could have gotten more for him earlier on.
Yeah.
So again, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there, but it's a lesson to be learned
I,
and for the people out there.
I was about to say it's the truth of the situation. I wish I had handled it differently. So if you guys are in a similar situation or you could see a similar situation coming, you definitely want to capitalize on that early while you have the opportunity to.
Exactly. And then the last one here for roster construction, no, we have two more. This one is about wide receivers. So again, it depends on how many of each position you start in your starting lineup, as well as scoring format. But prioritizing young, high-end wide receivers is typically a really, really good bet. Wide receivers, just by virtue of the position that they play, will retain value a lot longer than running backs. And also, finding undervalued but fairly productive running backs is typically a lot easier to do than finding the same type of wide receivers.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Like the younger wide receivers are always good to have because one, longevity wise, you can kind of depend on a wide receiver, at least a high end one, performing for a long time in their career into even early 30s, stuff like that. To see that from a running back, it's pretty rare. You're not going to see that all too often at all, really. I don't think we've ever seen a running back over 30 be super productive. Like I know Adrian Peterson kind of productive over his 30s. Frank Gore held
Yeah,
on for a couple years, but it's just not super common to see anything like that whatsoever. And a young wide receiver can really do some wonders, like a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, just to name a couple. Drake London coming
yeah,
into his, Garrett Wilson coming into his now, Traylon Burks.
yeah, 100%. Like a wide receiver can retain a similar level of value for season, at 21 or 22, all the way until they're 28 or 29. You have with the high end guys, you have like an 8 year window where you can sell them for almost the same price before their price starts to dip. Whereas running backs, that window is like 2 maybe 3 years, which is what we talked about. Why you want to get rid of running backs when they're at their peak value if you're not contending. Wide receivers though you can hoard because I'm assuming you're not going to be in a 6 year rebuild. Hopefully you're not. Try to compete earlier than that, but you can have them 3 4 years while you're rebuilding your team and then be ready for that championship run. And then the last roster construction piece of advice is don't overinvest in the tight end position. And this one might get a little bit misconstrued, but as we go through it, hopefully you'll understand. Um, I know that this is supposed to be evergreen, and it is, but for like a real life example for right now, if it's not Kelsey, you might as well get your tight end on the cheap. You can make the argument for guys like Andrews, Pitts, Hawkinson, Goddard, and like I do like some of those. I like a lot of those guys, really. But in recent history, if you didn't have Kelsey, it wasn't worth the investment in any of the other top tier guys. So, for example, this past year, the gap between tight end one and tight end two in points per game was bigger than the gap between tight end two and tight end 19. Like it was just such a huge value drop if you didn't have Kelsey to any of the rest of the tight end position. Um, so I just think the biggest takeaway from what I'm trying to say here is if you can't get a stud at tight end, don't reach because you're probably going to regret it.
Yeah, because fantasy football has kind of reached the point, at least right now, where like Eric said, if you don't have Travis Kelsey at this point with another tight end, it's just wishful thinking. And it's a matter of how much draft capital are you willing to put into wishful thinking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because nothing else is certain unless you have Travis Kelsey, because he's going to ball out every year. He hasn't shown any signs of declining yet. Whereas these
Yeah.
other guys, Mark Andrews, we saw he finishes the tight end one last year. Even finishes the tight end 3 or 4 this year. I forget exactly where he finished at because I know
I
Hawkinson
can,
finished at the tight end 2 spot.
yeah, I can look it up if you want to keep
But it really
rolling.
doesn't even matter. It was just the fact that he was the tight end one last year, and the drop off between where he was last year to this year was tremendous. So it's like,
He fit, he finishes the tight end four.
yeah. And the tight end 4, as you said before, the gap between the tight end 1 and tight end 2 was gigantic, whereas the tight end 2 to the tight end 4 can't have been that big whatsoever. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just,
Exactly. The gap between Kelsey and Mark Andrews was over 100 points, but the gap between him and Hawkinson was like less than 20.
Yeah, so you're investing in a boom year and you're hoping for
Yeah,
the best.
yeah. And I know that in Dynasty that might sound a little backwards when we're talking about a guy like Kelsey who's in his 30s and potentially reaching the end of his career. But again, like I think if it's not the guy that's at the top, whether, in years past it was Rob Gronkowski, before that it was Tony Gonzalez or whatever, now it's Travis Kelsey. If it's not that guy, go for the cheaper guys. Like, we're gonna have a Dynasty trade targets video that's coming out in the next few days. Um, or potentially the same day as this. I'm not sure when it's going to go out, but like guys like Chigo Conquo, I really like. Potentially even guys like the rookie Trey McBride. They're going to be way, way, way cheaper than any of these other guys that you can get, and I just don't think the value drop off is as significant as most people would lead you to believe.
Definitely agree.
Yeah. All right, so that'll do it for roster construction. We are on to trade advice. So this is just kind of some general ways to time your trades to get the best value. So the first one here is that the best time to sell veterans is in season, especially when you're close to the playoffs. You want to try to sell to contenders that are pushing either to get in the playoffs or to make that championship run. And conversely, the worst time to sell veterans is around the time of the combine or the NFL draft or your rookie draft, when the hype for all of the incoming rookies is at its peak. And that's going to bring down the value of all those veteran guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because people love the prospect of players, people love the outlook, people love looking at those draft profiles and seeing the comparisons. Oh, this guy's the next. Who's the guy they keep calling the next Alvin Kamara? Is that Gibbs?
Jameer Gibbs,
Yeah.
dude, I hate that comparison. We'll talk about that when we get to his breakdown, but yeah.
But it's just stuff like that. People love seeing those profiles and getting those rose colored glasses and not remembering, hey, these are still the kids that need to be developed. They're not going to, well, some of them might. Some guys are freaks, but they're not usually going to jump in immediately and be superstars at the level that some of these veterans are already. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And then kind of the opposite end of the spectrum for rookies and draft picks, it's just the exact opposite. So the best time to sell is around the NFL draft and rookie drafts, when they're at their peak value, when the media, like that's all they're talking about. That's the big hype cycle. Value is going to be the highest for rookies and for draft picks around those times of the year. And then for me, I think the best time to sell rookies is like I'm going to give the example for wide receivers because I think that that's the most consistent year over year. But after a slow start to the season, I love to buy the dip on young rookie wide receivers. So, like an example could be like Garrett Wilson, where after the draft, he got really high draft capital. His value was all the way up here. And then we got closer to the season. We're like, okay, Elijah Moore's still on the team. He might be the wide receiver one. Corey Davis is an established veteran. He could eat into his targets. His value started to dip a little bit. We got into the season, week one, week two, week three. He's not producing at a high level for fantasy yet. His value, it doesn't crater. Like people still valued him highly, but it was the lowest that you were probably going to be able to acquire him at any point. And then he started to take off at the end of the season.
I have an even better example. Even we can
Yeah.
go back a little bit in the time machine. We can go back 1 year to Mr. Jamar Chase, right?
Oh, bro.
If people want to just take a second to remember that back in training camp and going into the
This was
preseason,
crazy.
people thought Jamar Chase couldn't catch a ball anymore.
That was crazy.
People thought that just because the NFL footballs had black stripes on them and not white stripes anymore.
Well, they
Oh,
don't
but
have black stripes, but because they didn't have white
because they didn't
stripes.
have white stripes on them. Sorry, that he could not catch a football. His brain just could not see the football anymore. It was camouflaged in the sky. He can't catch a ball anymore. And then he started to get off to a little bit of a slow start, had some drops in the preseason. Everyone was like, oh my God, it's because he took a year off. Oh shit, he's not going to be good.
Yeah.
And then after like week 5, he just took the fuck off. And he's just the guy
Yeah.
that he is now. But going into that, you probably could have bought Jamar Chase from some idiots who just didn't think that he was going to be good going forward because a lot of the news was saying he
100%.
wasn't going to be good for some reason.
100%. Dude, people just love to talk for the sake of talking. And you get that in training camp all the time. You brought up Jamar Chase. That's the perfect example. Also, this past offseason with Traylon Burks and his asthma issues, and
Mm-hmm.
he's running with the third team and all that shit. Bro, his value was so low at that point, and then the slow start to the season where I'm gonna forget the little white guy's name. He was also a rookie that
Kyle
got drafted
Phillips.
in this. Kyle Phillips, thank you.
Hmm.
When he was starting over him and actually like producing for fantasy, it was like, man, Traylon must be a total bust. Buy in. That is the time to buy because now his value has skyrocketed and it still hasn't caught up to where it needs to be. So yeah, those are just some examples of that point.
Hell yeah.
Um, and then another one on here, you need to be really careful making win now trades. You can never be sure how a player is going to perform, especially in such a short time frame like the playoffs. So I typically just wouldn't advise making a win now trade unless you know that you'd feel comfortable making that same deal, knowing that you won't win the championship.
Yeah, definitely agree there because it's just the way that you can't predict what a player is really going to do at the end of the day. So there is no real win now trade because you don't know what's going to happen going forward. That player could play one play for your team and then something unfortunate could happen and they're not good going forward. So, like Eric
Yeah.
said, whatever decision you make, you got to be comfortable knowing that that's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I have an example of a trade that happened between the two of us. It wasn't super high stakes, so it ended up not being a huge deal. But you can imagine the same thing on a little bit of a higher scale. I was trying to compete. I was going into the playoffs, not this past season, but the year before in Dynasty. And that was when Cam Newton got re-signed by the Panthers, and he had a couple blow-up games right before the playoffs started, the fantasy playoffs. And I had a quarterback go down to injury. I needed to fill my super flex spot. And so I reached out to you,
Hmm.
knowing that his shelf life wasn't going to be long, but I needed something. I traded you to get Cam Newton. I traded you a third and a fourth round rookie draft pick, which again doesn't sound crazy, but legit, Cam Newton did nothing for me that playoffs. He had I think like a 6 point game and then got benched. So I literally couldn't play him. And I just gave away free draft picks for Will to use and add to his team. So I regret making that deal. And like you can imagine the same thing on a little bit of a higher scale. I just advise against it. It seems too risky to me.
Yeah, like you got to remember, there's no compensatory picks in Dynasty. So like,
Yeah,
if something doesn't work out for you, it just doesn't work out. You don't get compensated for it, like in the NFL. So be
exactly.
careful.
Yep. And then on the flip side of that, I love making deals with teams that are trying to win now, especially like buying big name players off of an injury discount. So similar to the situation that I just said, like I had a quarterback go down to injury. Um, but for a better example, for like this season, Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson both went down like right before the fantasy playoffs. And so managers that had them on their teams that were ready to compete and win a championship might have been willing to move off of those guys, for another quarterback plus a little bit on top.
Hmm.
And I think that that's the perfect time to jump in and buy that injury discount.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Because it's just that's the time the price is going to be the lowest on those players that otherwise would have been unattainable for you.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and then just some quick points about trade negotiation. There's not too much left here. Pretty cut and dry video for you guys, but I hope you guys are learning from it, gaining something from it. But we'll get into this trade negotiation stuff. This one, you're more likely to get a deal done if you approach a team or multiple teams, but directly rather than just posting in a group chat that a player is for sale. And another note about that specifically, when you make it known that a player is for sale to the entire league, most of the time it devalues them. It makes them less valuable in trade because everybody knows that you're trying to get rid of them.
Yeah, 'cause it's like, why doesn't he
So
want them? Why doesn't this guy want them anymore? Huh? Or why do I
exactly,
want
even
them?
if it
He don't
doesn't
want them.
exactly, even if it doesn't really make sense, even if that's your only rationale, people think that way. If you see that somebody's trying to get rid of them, you're like, why? Like, what are you trying to scam me for? Maybe I shouldn't trade as much for them. But my advice would be to go look around your league, find teams that have a need at the position of the player that you're trying to trade away, or an abundance at the position that you're looking for. And then also the biggest one, I think this one is the most important, but also probably the hardest to get on board with, is don't send a lowball offer first. For real. Like, look at me right now. Don't do it. Don't be that guy. And I know because I've been that guy. A lot of us have. And I'm working on this too. But for real, don't send a lowball offer. I think it's important, if you're trying to get deals done, if you're trying to get the most deals done, and if you're trying to establish a good relationship with the other members in your league so that you can trade with them for years to come, just send your final offer first. That's the best way to get it done. You're gonna have the best time, get the most trades done. Like that's I'm repeating myself, but it's because it's important.
Yeah, there's been times where there have been players who I feel like I'll probably never end up making a trade with because they always come with lowball offers. Or
Yeah.
they'll send me an offer and I'll literally look at it and I'll be like, yeah, so this conversation's already over. Because I don't even know where to go from a lowball offer. It's like, obviously, you don't want to give up anything good. So what are we even here talking about at this point? So
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
thing you got to be looking at from the other player's perspective. Like, would you respect the offer that you're sending?
That's dude. Well said. That is perfect. Look at it. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes. See that trade offer. Pretend that you're their team. Take on their team and say, "Is this going to help me?" And if the answer is no, don't send the offer. Don't do it to them. Because, like you said, ends the conversation immediately. You have no incentive or motivation to negotiate further. And if that person sends you a trade offer in the future, you're just less likely to want to do it, right?
Yeah, because that person's just the lowball person to me now. It's just, there's some sort of catch with this trade I'm not seeing anymore. Even if there isn't, it's just the preconceived notion I'm going to have now going forward.
Exactly. So I know that the first instinct is to try to maximize value, and I don't think that trying to maximize value is a bad thing. But be a good person, do the right thing, send a good offer when you're trying to trade.
Hell yeah.
And then the very last thing on this list is to make an effort to get to know your league mates and their tendencies. So, if you're in a league with a bunch of your buddies that you've known for forever, this can be a lot easier. But if you're jumping into a league that you joined online, you don't know anybody in there, that could be something that takes some doing. But I think it's really important to try to do. So, like, ask yourself the questions: does this person love to hoard rookie draft picks? Is this person always trying to compete and always looking to buy veterans? Does this person have a positional preference in the way that they build their teams? And like knowing that information is going to make it so much easier to trade with a person because you know their motivation and you know what they're looking for.
Yeah, you know what they're going to value the most. Some people might value just future stuff and future picks. It's just, or some people just want to have a lot of picks, see how the classes come out, and then use those for trade leverage. But it's just one thing. You don't know what another person's going to be doing until you take the time to really pay attention to what they're doing. Just watch how they
Yeah.
build their teams because you're going to see it. There's going to be a Rams in your league who doesn't want draft picks, they only want players.
Fuck them picks.
Yeah. Or you're going to have the Sam Hinkies of the league who just have all the picks, and it's like, yeah, who wants a pick? So just keep an eye out for that because it's going to help you a whole lot.
100%. So, yeah, that is the end of our hopefully evergreen dynasty advice. I hope that people can look back on this for years to come and see, useful fantasy advice for dynasty leagues, whether, like I said, whether you're just getting started or whether you've been doing this for a long time. So, Will, you have anything to say to the people before we wrap up and get out of here?
All I got for the people is thank you for watching. If you made it this far in the video, it means you like the vid. So make sure you guys subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when we drop more. Like and comment, help get us out in the algorithm and get us in front of more people so they can also get this advice, make everybody's Dynasty League a little bit better. And then check out the description where you can find our other social media accounts and our TikTok so you guys can give us a follow there as well. Yeah, but with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and we love you, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Peace.